Welcome to the Deep Dive, the show where we take a stack of incredible sources and really pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge to help you become instantly well-informed.
That's the goal.
Today we're plunging into a name that just echoes through history. You hear it and it's like thunder, hooves, Genghis Khan.
Absolutely. It evokes such powerful images.
Exactly. Vast armies, sweeping conquests, and empire-spanning continents. But here's the big question we're tackling in this deep dive. How did a man born into, well, absolute obscurity, right, amidst fragmented, warring, nomadic tribes, how did he rise to become one of history's most famous conquerors, the universal ruler of this monumental empire?
It truly is a remarkable story, yeah. And our mission here really is to guide you through that whole chaotic backdrop of 12th century Mongolia. We want to unveil how it led to this disciplined military state that just utterly reshaped the world. And as we get into understanding Genghis Khan, it's crucial to acknowledge the unique challenge we face with our sources. A lot of what we know, maybe most of what we know about him, comes from non-Mongol perspectives.
Right. People he conquered or people who feared him.
Exactly. And frankly, these accounts are often colored by, well, intense fear, even horror, really.
That's such a vital point. I'm thinking of, those chroniclers from the 13th century, like Matthew Paris. He was miles away physically, but he described the Mongols as this detestable nation of Satan that poured out like devils from Tartarus.
Wow. Yeah.
He was playing on the word Tartarus for hell and the tribal name Tatar, but it really captures the sheer terror, the dehumanization they evoked back then. How do we even navigate perspectives that are that biased?
It's a constant balancing act, honestly. On the other side of the coin, we have the secret history of the Mongols, which is, the foundational Mongol source, but it reads more like an epic saga.
Not exactly a dry historical record.
Not at all. It's like a heroic poem steeped in legend, imbued with this sense of, divine destiny.
So as we sift through these varying accounts, we'll be exploring several core questions for you.
Yeah.
What were his formative years really like? Marked by such profound adversity, real poverty.
Right.
How did he overcome those immense challenges to seize power and then consolidate it in a world where everyone was vying for dominance? What was the true nature of his military genius, his organizational genius? That allowed him to redefine warfare and leadership on such a massive scale.
And the legacy. And finally, how did his reign and his eventual death, how did that cement his place as this figure whose legacy, well, it still sparks debate today, doesn't it?
Absolutely. That sets the stage perfectly. Our goal here is to go beyond just the surface level stuff. We want to give you not just the facts, but the underlying context, the why behind his actions. We want you to connect the dots, have those genuine aha moments, give you a true shortcut to being deeply informed on one of history's most impactful and, incredibly complex figures. So let's unpack this then. Before we even get to Temüjin himself, which, as you know, was Genghis Khan's birth name, it's just absolutely crucial to understand the world he was born into. This wasn't some peaceful, idyllic steppe life.
Not even close.
It was dynamic, often incredibly violent, a frontier environment. And what really comes through from the sources is this fundamental relationship. It was kind of mutually hostile, but also profoundly interdependent between the nomadic tribes of the steppe and the settled agricultural society, especially China.
That dynamic is truly the bedrock. You have to understand that to understand any of this period. On one hand, you've got the nomadic peoples, like the various Mongol tribes. They had very specific needs. They needed goods from the settled south, things like grains, staple products, and certainly luxuries, silks, crafted metals.
Because they couldn't make themselves, basically.
Right. And they could get these in a few ways, sometimes through direct trade, often sporadic, or by taxing the caravans that, dared to cross their lands, or, as happened pretty frequently, through armed raids.
Just taking what they needed.
Pretty much. I mean, imagine the daily life on the steppe. You're constantly moving with your herds, surviving off the land, but you're perpetually needing what the sedentary world produced. It definitely fostered a culture of self-reliance, sure, but also one prone to raiding, whether out of necessity or just opportunity.
So it's this constant push and pull, a never-ending tension, really, that shaped everything. And on the other side, how did the settled peoples, particularly China, how did they handle this relationship with these formidable, very mobile neighbors?
Exactly. The settled peoples, especially the various Chinese dynasties, they couldn't just pretend that these nomadic groups weren't there. I mean, their history is deeply intertwined with resisting encroachment from the steppe. They came up with these elaborate strategies, trying to keep them at bay or, if possible, control them, sometimes through diplomacy, sometimes tribute, sometimes military campaigns.
It's a real balancing act for them, too.
Oh, absolutely. And it wasn't a static tension either. It created this fascinating interplay of power cycles that someone like Temüjin would eventually just master. We
Yeah.
see two main ones constantly at play here.
Okay, tell us about those cycles. What were they?
Well, first, there was China's own cycle of dynastic strength and weakness. When a Chinese dynasty was strong, it could project its military power, its administrative power, directly over Inner Asia. They'd try to subjugate or at least control the nomadic tribes, demanding tribute, imposing treaties, that sort of thing.
Flexing their muscles?
Right. But when a Chinese dynasty was weak, their whole strategy would shift dramatically. They try to play one barbarian tribe off against another, transferring their support, maybe offering subsidies, juggling alliances, anything to prevent any one tribe from getting too strong, too united, and becoming a major threat.
So a unified steppe was basically the nightmare scenario for a weak China.
Precisely, a nightmare. And that brings us straight to the second cycle. The unity and fragmentation among the steppe peoples themselves.
Okay.
At their peak, right, a nomadic tribe under a strong, determined leader could unite others. They could forge these vast confederations. And if China happened to be weak at the same time, well, that nomadic power could extend way beyond the steppe. You'd see vast conquests, even the establishment of nomadic dynasties within China itself.
Like a Yuan dynasty later on.
Exactly, the most famous example. However, our sources really emphasize that this extension of nomadic power over these, incompatible sedentary cultures of the South, it often carried its own nemesis, its own seeds of destruction. Well, the nomads would inevitably start to lose their traditional basis of superiority. That lightning mobility, right? The ability to strike quick and just disappear, needing very little supply, little fodder for their horses.
And get bogged down.
Exactly. They'd get bogged down, and they would slowly but surely get absorbed by the very Chinese culture they had conquered. And this would lead to their own disarray, their own eventual fragmentation.
So the very act of conquering and settling down would ultimately weaken them, forcing them back to the steppe eventually. It's a fascinating, almost self-defeating cycle, isn't it?
It really is. The cycle would then just resume. A powerful China would reemerge, and you'd see disarray and petty squabbling among ephemeral chieftains become the pattern again among the nomads. The history of the Mongol conquests, as our sources point out, it illustrates this analysis perfectly. And it's against this really intricate background, these political contrasts, these tensions, that the life of Genghis Khan has to be evaluated. He wasn't just some, inexplicable catastrophe, like a natural disaster or something God-given. Instead, his campaigns were the outcome of a very specific set of circumstances, which he manipulated with incredible skill. A soldier of immense ambition, determination, and, frankly, genius.
So he saw the opportunity within these cycles.
He absolutely did. He found his tribal world, the steppe, basically ready for unification. And crucially, this happened at a time when China and other settled states were, for various reasons, simultaneously in decline. He simply exploited that situation to its absolute fullest, turning the natural ebbs and flows of power into this unprecedented opportunity.
That's a really powerful way to frame it. He wasn't just this force of nature. He was a master manipulator of existing forces. It really underscores how understanding this deep historical backdrop is just essential to seeing Genghis Khan not just as some brutal conqueror, but as a product. And a master of his turbulent environment. This isn't just about battles and dates. It's about understanding these deep societal forces that were constantly at play, setting the stage for someone like him to emerge.
It truly is. Without grasping this context, his rise seems almost supernatural, like it came out of nowhere. But with it, we start to see the strategic brilliance, the timing, the ruthless pragmatism that allowed him to unify these disparate tribes and then leverage that unity to just stunning effect against the declining sedentary powers. It's a real testament to how larger historical cycles can converge, to create extraordinary opportunities for extraordinary individuals.
Okay, so from that grand sweep of history, let's zoom right in on Temüjin himself. We're talking about the boy who would become Genghis Khan and his beginnings. Humble, yet shrouded in legend. What was Genghis Khan's early life actually like? The sources paint this picture that's a stark contrast, isn't it, between these auspicious legends and a brutally harsh reality.
It's a remarkable dichotomy, yeah. The chronology of his early life, it's a bit uncertain. Various dates are cited for his birth, 1155, 1167, though 1162 is the one favored today, especially in Mongolia. He was born near Lake Baikal, up north, and named Temüjin after a Tatar leader his father, Yusugei, had just defeated.
Right.
Now, the legends surrounding his birth, they're quite extraordinary. He's said to have come into the world holding a clot of blood in his hand.
A sign of destiny.
A clear sign of destiny, a warrior's fate, right? And even more mythically, his first ancestor was supposedly a gray wolf, born with a destiny from heaven on high. These stories, they clearly elevate his origins to something divine, almost predestined for greatness, and they served a powerful purpose later on, legitimizing his rule.
But the reality, as you said, was anything but promising. What was the actual truth of his early years?
Far, far from it. When Temüjin was just 9 years old, his father, Yesugei, who was a respected leader, a member of the royal Borjin clan of the Mongols, he was poisoned by a band of Tatars.
The same group his father had just defeated someone from.
Possibly related, yeah. It wasn't a random act. It was the brutal continuation of this old, bitter clan feud that had spanned generations. And this tragedy had immediate, devastating consequences for Temüjin and his family. The rest of the clan, particularly led by this rival Taikut family, they saw an opportunity.
Power vacuum.
Exactly. They swiftly abandoned Yesugei's widow, Hulun, and her young children, including Temüjin. Their motivation seems pretty clear from the sources. They saw the family as just too weak to exercise leadership without Yesugei there. So they seized the moment, usurped power for themselves, and left this prominent family utterly destitute, abandoned.
So at 9 years old, he loses his father to poison and then is literally abandoned by his own kin, left to fend for himself and his family on the harsh steppe. That's just an unimaginable start for someone who becomes a universal ruler.
It was. I mean, for a time, the small family endured this life of extreme poverty. They were forced to eat roots, fish, a stark deviation from the normal, much richer nomad diet of, mutton and mare's milk.
A huge drop in status and survival.
Huge. Imagine the sheer hardship. A royal clan member, reduced to scavenging just to survive, far from the life of a proud pastoralist. Yet even in this destitution, there are these two powerful anecdotes that come down to us from the sources. They illustrate both his really straitened circumstances, but also, significantly, the nascent power he already had to attract supporters, just through sheer force of personality. These stories are really critical in understanding how he eventually came to power.
These anecdotes sound revealing. Tell us about the first one, the wooden collar escape.
Right. So the story goes that at one point he was actually captured by the Taikut themselves, the very family who'd abandoned him. Instead of killing him, they kept him around their camps, forced him to wear this wooden collar, a king, this heavy, cumbersome device.
Humiliating and disabling.
Yeah, totally. But one night, while they were all feasting, and apparently their guards were pretty inept, Temüjin saw his chance. He seized the moment, knocked down a sentry with a blow from this wooden collar he was wearing, and just fled into the night. The Taikut searched for him all night. And crucially, he was spotted by one of their own people, a Taikut man named Sorkhan Shira. But instead of denouncing him, this man, apparently impressed by the fire in his eyes, chose not to betray him.
Wow.
He actually helped Temüjin escape, hiding him, risking his own life to do so.
That's incredible. Even as a young, desperate captive, something about him compelled loyalty, or at least mercy, from an unexpected source. It really speaks to some kind of inherent charisma, doesn't it? A magnetic draw that maybe cut across tribal lines even then.
Absolutely. It's this early glimpse into his profound ability to inspire loyalty, and maybe for others to see past the immediate circumstances, sensing something greater in him. The second anecdote is equally compelling, showing his capacity to inspire this profound, almost immediate loyalty from complete strangers.
And this is the story of Borchu, who became his first really loyal follower, his nuker.
Yes, Borchu. On another occasion, horse thieves came and stole 8 of the 9 horses that his impoverished family owned. I mean, imagine, that's nearly everything.
Devastating for a nomad family.
Totally. Temüjin, determined, sets out to pursue them. Along the way, he stops to ask this young stranger, a man named Borchu, if he'd seen the horses. Without hesitation, Borchu immediately just leaves the milking he was doing, gives Temüjin a fresh horse, and sets out with him to help recover the lost beasts.
Just like that.
Just like that. And what's truly striking is that Borchu refused any reward afterwards. He simply recognized, it seems, Temüjin's inherent authority or potential, attached himself irrevocably to him as a knicker that's a free companion, a bond of deep personal loyalty, and he abandoned his own family in the process to follow this young, impoverished stranger.
Abandoning his own family. That's a monumental leap of faith and loyalty based on what? A single encounter. It just showcases Temüjin's extraordinary power to attract these dedicated followers. Through sheer force of personality, even when he literally had nothing material to offer them.
It's a theme that just runs through his entire rise to power. Now, despite their abandonment and extreme poverty, Temüjin and his family apparently preserved a considerable fund of prestige just by being members of the royal Borjigin clan.
That name still meant something.
It still carried weight, and this residual prestige proved crucial. Among other things, it allowed him to claim the wife his father, Yasuge, had betrothed him to just before his death, a woman named Berta. This connection would prove absolutely vital in more ways than one, setting the stage for his first major strategic alliance.
And this is where the Merkit people come into the story, right? Because there was some bad blood there, a long-standing grudge.
Indeed there was. The Merkit tribe, they lived up in northern Mongolia, and they held this profound grudge because Yasugai, Temujin's father, had actually stolen his own wife, Hulin Temujin's mother, from one of their men years before.
Ah, so it's payback.
Exactly. In retaliation, the Merkit raided Temujin's camp and ravished, abducted his own recently claimed wife, Berta. This wasn't just a profound personal insult, it was a strategic blow, a challenge to his, burgeoning status. Temujin, despite his destitution, felt able to appeal to Togril, the Khan of the Karaite tribe, for help in getting Berta back.
And Togril wasn't just anybody.
No, Togril was a major player. He was Yasugai Zanata, his sworn blood brother, a sacred bond. And at that time, he was described as the most powerful Mongol prince, a key potential ally.
But what could Temüjin possibly offer Togril? Given his state, totally impoverished, what compelled such a powerful leader to even consider helping him?
This is where you see his foresight, his strategic thinking, even at such a young age. He had apparently had the foresight to rekindle this vital old friendship by presenting Togril with a sable skin cloak.
A sable skin?
Yes, this was his only significant possession. It was received as a bridal gift, probably part of Berta's dowry. He had no army, no wealth, nothing but this precious fur. Yet in exchange, the secret history reports that Togril not only promised to help reunite Temujin's scattered people, but also furnished a massive army, 20,000 men, and even persuaded Jomuka, who was a boyhood friend of Temujin's and a significant leader in his own right, to supply an army as well.
20,000 men for a sable cloak. That seems like a bit of a stretch, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Especially given Temujin's supposed destitution.
It really does, and this discrepancy, it highlights the unique nature of the secret history as a source. It often focuses more on destiny, personal influence, maybe exaggerating things, rather than strict logistical reality. It reads like a narrative of destined greatness unfolding,
Yeah, it definitely paints a picture.
But it underscores that even then, Temüjin possessed this extraordinary ability to leverage existing relationships to inspire confidence in his potential, even when all the objective measures pointed to his weakness. He clearly had influence far beyond his current standing, this magnetic pull that drew powerful figures to his side. I mean, when you reflect on the sheer resilience the cunning Temüjin displayed from such a young age, losing everything at 9, abandoned by his own kin, enduring extreme poverty, yet still attracting powerful allies and inspiring this profound loyalty, it truly makes you wonder, what would you do if you lost everything at 9 and were abandoned? It's a testament to an almost unparalleled will to survive and then to thrive. This raw, unyielding determination would absolutely define his path to power.
Okay, so he's gone from total obscurity, surviving by fishing and eating roots, to having these formidable allies, Togril, Jomuka. That's a massive shift. But the jump from merely surviving this brutal existence to completely dominating the entire steppe, that must have required more than just influential friends, right? What's the first strategic principle we see emerge as he begins this relentless ascent to power? Was it just brute force, or was there something far more calculated going on?
Oh, it was anything but accidental. From this point on, the sources show Temüjin employed this systematic, cold, and calculated ruthlessness in eliminating rivals and consolidating loyalty. One of his defining strategic principles, which he started applying right after recovering Berta with his allied forces and routing the Merkit, was this. He tried never to leave an enemy in his rear.
Never leave an enemy in his rear.
That's right.
Chilling, actually. But incredibly insightful as a principle. What did that mean in practice for a leader on the steppe? And how did it set him apart from maybe other chieftains?
It meant he would ensure no potential threat remained behind him as he advanced or moved on to the next objective. This wasn't just about military might in the moment, it was a brutal, long-term strategic doctrine. Genghis Khan understood that true power lay not just in conquering forward, but in absolute systemic security from behind. Every rival, every potential rebel, every source of future trouble was a flaw in the system to be eliminated, not just defeated or subdued temporarily.
Total security.
Total security. Years later, before he would even dare attack the massive Jin Empire in China, he meticulously ensured that no nomad leader survived in his rear who could potentially stab him in the back while he was occupied elsewhere. This wasn't just about immediate victory, it was about long-term comprehensive security and preventing future rebellions before they could even start.
And we see this play out almost immediately in how he handled internal threats, right? Like the Jurchen clan incident.
Exactly. The Jurchen clan nobility, who were supposedly his allies, they took advantage of his absence while he was off raiding the Tatars. They plundered his property, his camp. Temüjin's response upon his return was swift and absolutely brutal. He exterminated the clan nobility and took the common people as his own soldiery and servants.
Wow. Exterminated the leadership.
Yes. So not only were there immediate and severe consequences for betrayal, but notice the pragmatism too. He absorbed their manpower, turning former adversaries, or at least their followers, into his own resources. It was about eliminating the rival leadership, but leveraging the population. Very efficient in a ruthless way.
In this combination, pragmatism mixed with extreme ruthlessness, it only seems to intensify as his power grows, particularly in his dealings with the Tatars, the ones who poisoned his father.
Indeed. When he felt strong enough to risk a final showdown with the formidable Tatars, the people who had caused him so much grief, he first defeated them decisively in battle. Then, his method of dealing with the survivors was chillingly efficient, a detail that often, sends shivers down your spine when you read it. He ordered the slaughter of all those taller than the height of a cart axle.
Taller than the height of a cart axle.
Mm-hmm.
That's such a specific and horrifying detail. What was the presumed rationale behind such an extreme measure? Was it just pure vengeance for his father?
Vengeance was likely part of it, yes. But the speculation, based on historical practice and Mongol strategy later, is that this wasn't just wanton cruelty. The children, being below cart axle height, could be expected to grow up largely ignorant of their old tribal identity, their specific Tatar heritage and grievances.
So they could be assimilated.
Exactly. They could be assimilated, raised as Mongols, becoming loyal followers of Temüjin's new order, without any lingering clan feuds or desire for revenge against him or his people. It was a calculated act to eradicate past loyalties, break the cycle of vendetta, and create a unified, loyal future generation, devoid of those old, fragmenting tribal allegiances. This method became a hallmark, a terrifying one, of Mongol conquests, fostering that fear and terror we talked about earlier.
That's a profound, albeit incredibly brutal, insight into his long-term strategic thinking. It's a terrifying blueprint for total dominance, erasing the past to build his future. How did this systematic elimination extend even to his former allies, like Togrul of the Karaite, the man who helped them get Berg back?
The pattern continued, ruthlessly. The crucial alliance with Togrul, the Khan of the Karaite, eventually broke down. It seems to have been due to a mix of factors: Jamukha's constant intrigues stirring up trouble, Togrul's own son's ambitions clashing with Temüjin's rising power, and perhaps Togrul's own vacillation. It led to open conflict between them.
Friends become rivals.
The story of the steppe, really. Temüjin's decisive victory over Togrul and the powerful Karaite tribe was followed by a similar dispersal strategy. He scattered the Karaite people among the various Mongol tribes as servants and troops, effectively dissolving their independent tribal identity and integrating them fully into his nascent unified Mongol nation. No independent Karaite power base remained.
So, across the board, whether as enemies like the Tatars, betrayers like the Jurchen, or former allies like the Karaite, the old leadership was removed off violently, and the common people were incorporated into his growing power structure. It sounds like a deliberate blueprint for total tribal restructuring, a complete overhaul of the social and military fabric of the steppe.
That's precisely what it was. Our sources really synthesized the why behind these actions. It wasn't just random cruelty or rage. It was a strategic imperative driven by several clear goals. first, eliminate all rival aristocrats who could possibly foment resistance or challenge his authority. Second, provide himself with an ever-growing loyal fighting force. And most importantly, fundamentally, quote, to crush the sense of clan loyalties that favored fragmentation and to unite all the nomads in personal obedience to his family.
Breaking the old bonds, forging new ones directly to him.
Exactly. And when he was finally accepted as emperor of all the steppe peoples in 1206, he cemented this new order. He formally distributed thousands of families from the defeated tribes and his original followers to the custody of his own relatives and his most loyal companions, his nokers. He was actively replacing the existing fragmented pattern of tribes and clans with something much closer to a feudal structure, centered entirely on personal loyalty to him and his lineage.
To really understand how he achieved that final unification, we have to look at his relationships, don't we? And none seems more pivotal, more complex than the rivalry with Jamuka, his boyhood friend, his Benad for a time. The sources state that the break with Jamuka brought about a polarization within the Mongol world. What actually happened between these two? They were blood brothers, allies. What caused such a profound divide that it basically split the Mongol world, turning this strong alliance into the defining rivalry of his rise?
It's a really fascinating and honestly somewhat enigmatic part of the secret history. Their renewed friendship after Temüjin recovered Bertay with Jamuka's help, it only lasted about a year and a half, maybe 2 years. Then one day, while the two friends and their camps were on the march together, Jamuka apparently uttered this very cryptic remark about the choice of a camping site for the night.
Cryptic, huh?
Well, the secret history is tantalizingly brief here. It uses quite elusive, poetic language, making a definitive, literal explanation really difficult. It was something about which type of terrain was better for horse herders versus sheep herders, possibly implying a subtle hierarchy or preference. Whatever it was, this seemingly innocuous comment prompted Temüjin's wife, the astute Berta, to immediately advise him that it was high time for the two friends to go their separate ways.
Wow. An enigmatic remark. Berta's immediate strong advice and then a split. Sounds like a moment absolutely pregnant with political maneuvering, doesn't it? What are the interpretations of this cryptic separation? What was really going on?
Well, historians have debated it quite a bit. Some suggest Jamuka was deliberately trying to provoke a leadership crisis, maybe testing Temüjin's authority, or perhaps making a subtle slight against him, asserting his own seniority or prestige. Alternatively, it's speculated that the language in the secret history is deliberately obscure, maybe to gloss over the fact that Temüjin himself was preparing to desert his comrade, consolidating his own power base, and simply used Jamuka's ambiguous comment as a convenient pretext to make the break.
Plausible deniability, perhaps.
Perhaps. In any event, Temüjin took Berta's advice. He separated his camp from Jamuka's that very night, and crucially, as he rode away, many of Jamuka's own men chose to abandon Jamuka and join Temüjin's side instead.
Really? Why would they do that?
Well, the sources suggest they were seeing in Temüjin the man they thought more likely to win in the end. They sensed the shift in power, the momentum.
So even at this early stage, people were placing their bets. Temüjin was already viewed as the rising star, the more pragmatic choice for survival and, ultimately, success. It suggests a kind of political savvy or maybe just an aura of destiny that resonated deeply with these nomadic tribesmen.
Absolutely. And the secret history itself, of course, justifies their actions in grand, epic terms. One of the men who switched sides tells Temüjin of a vision he had, which meant that heaven and earth had agreed that Temüjin should be lord of the empire.
Divine mandate. Very convenient.
Very convenient, yes. It adds that layer of divine justification to the shift in loyalties, giving it a sense of inevitable destiny. But looking at it from a more, realpolitik perspective, it was clearly the interplay of the constantly vacillating loyalties of the steppe. Clansmen knew what was happening, they could read the signs, and some of them hastened to move over to Temüjin's side, realizing that a truly strong leader was emerging and that it would be, prudent to declare for him early on, get in on the ground floor, so to speak.
And how does the secret history ultimately portray Jamuka, his former, right now his primary rival? Does he ever get a fair shake in that narrative, or is he just the villain?
Well, Jamuka, sadly, has no real advocate in history, as our sources point out. The secret history tells us a lot about him, sometimes even portraying him with a degree of sympathy, but fundamentally it's the chronicle of Temüjin's family, right?
Yep.
So Jamuka is inevitably cast as the enemy, the obstacle, even if sometimes he seems like a reluctant one. He remains an enigma. He clearly had sufficient force of personality to lead a rival coalition of powerful Mongol princes, and he even got himself elected Gur Khan or Supreme Khan by them at one point.
So he wasn't insignificant.
Not at all. He was a major contender. Yet the secret history also consistently describes him as an intriguer, maybe short-sighted, ready to desert his friends, as he later did with the Naiman, or even turn on them for quick profit or advantage. The source explicitly states something like, but for Temüjin, it might have been within Jamuka's power to dominate the Mongols, but Temüjin was incomparably the greater man, and the rivalry broke Jamuka. It really underscores Temüjin's unparalleled drive, his strategic genius, compared to anyone else on the steppe at that time.
So throughout these turbulent years, before that definitive moment in 1206 when he becomes Genghis Khan, Temüjin was just systematically clearing the field. It sounds less like random tribal warfare and more like a methodical campaign of total consolidation. Is that fair?
That's absolutely fair. That's exactly what it looks like. Initially, various clan leaders grouped around both Temüjin and Jamuka, seeing them as strong chieftains, potential protectors, or allies. A few years before the turn of the century, some even proposed to make Temüjin Khan of the Mongols. But the terms in which they did so, promising loyalty in war in the hunt, suggest they were still looking for a reliable general, maybe a primus inter pares, not the absolute overlord he was determined to become.
His ambitions were higher.
Much higher. And indeed, some of those same leaders later deserted him when things got tough, showing he was still building his influence, consolidating his base. Even the powerful Jin emperor in northern China initially looked on him as, well, of no great consequence, giving him a lesser title than his ally Tughril when they briefly cooperated against the Tatars.
Underestimated him.
Massively underestimated him. But Temüjin used these crucial years, roughly from about 1190 up to 1206, to systematically, relentlessly eliminate all his rivals. Successive coalitions formed by Jamuka were defeated, one after another. The Tatars were exterminated in that chilling manner we discussed earlier, revenge and assimilation combined. Tughril himself, his former Brandada, perhaps manipulated by Jamuka's intrigues and his own son's ambitions, entered into outright war against Temüjin and was utterly destroyed along with his powerful Karaite people. Finally, over in the west, the Naiman ruler, who was growing increasingly fearful of Temüjin's rising power, tried to form yet another coalition, again with Jamuka's participation, but they were utterly defeated by Temüjin, and Jamuka, true to the character painted in the secret history, deserted the Naiman Khan at the last moment. He was eventually captured by his own men and delivered to Temüjin, who, according to the source, granted him a noble death without shedding blood.
What a ruthless, methodical, and efficient campaign of consolidation. It really suggests a vision that extended far beyond mere survival or even tribal leadership. He was aiming for total dominance from early on, relentlessly eliminating every potential competitor.
These campaigns, happening in just those few years leading up to 1206, they left Temüjin as the undisputed, unchallenged master of the entire Mongolian steppe. It all culminated in that fateful year. 1206. A grand assembly, a Kurultai, was convened by the banks of the river Onan, a place of deep historical significance for the Mongols. And there, Temüjin was formally proclaimed Genghis Khan.
Genghis Khan, universal ruler.
The title itself is believed to mean something like oceanic ruler or universal ruler, signifying his claim to absolute authority over all nomadic peoples and implicitly, a much, much wider dominion beyond the steppe.
So 1206. He gets the title universal ruler. What was the first thing he did to solidify this new Mongol nation? And what was its ultimate purpose? Because this isn't just a title change, is it? It marks a fundamental turning point, not just for the Mongols, but for global history itself. This newly unified nation is now poised for conquest on an unprecedented scale. What was he best known for after this point? What defines the Genghis Khan era?
The year 1206 fundamentally, radically reshaped Mongolia. The sources are very clear on this. Petty tribal quarrels and raids were a thing of the past. Suddenly, that constant internal conflict just stopped. The traditional clan and tribe system, the very basis of steppe society for centuries, was systematically dismantled. Well, old clan and tribe names either fell out of use entirely, or if they persisted, the people bearing them were subsequently found scattered all across the vast Mongol world. It's a testament to the utter wrecking, the deliberate shattering of the old social order. In its place, a truly unified Mongol nation came into existence, and this nation was, unequivocally, as the sources state, the personal creation of Genghis Khan. This wasn't just another temporary confederation of tribes, it was a singular, cohesive entity forged under his direct command and vision.
And it wasn't just a fleeting unification either, was it? I mean, the Mongol identity he forged, it endured for centuries, didn't it?
No, remarkably so. Our sources state that this unified Mongol nation, his personal creation, has survived through many vicissitudes, things like feudal disintegration later on, periods of incipient retribalization, even colonial occupation. In more modern times it survived to the present day. That's an astonishingly enduring legacy of nation building right there. But the immediate overarching purpose of this newly unified state in 1206, it was crystal clear, above all for war. Every single aspect of this new nation was geared toward military effectiveness.
So he essentially forged an entire nation as a military machine. That was its primary function.
That was its primary function, yes. The organization was key. His troops were meticulously divided up using the decimal system, a highly efficient structure that completely replaced traditional tribal groupings for military purposes.
Units of 10, 100,000.
Exactly. Units of 10, 100, 1,000, and 10,000, the famous Temüjin. And this organizational structure deliberately broke down those old tribal loyalties. It ensured that men from different clans, different backgrounds, fought side by side within the same unit, fostering a new, unified Mongol identity loyal to him. They were rigidly disciplined, which was revolutionary for nomadic armies at the time. He enforced strict codes of conduct and absolute obedience through harsh penalties.
No room for the old ways.
None. They were exceptionally well equipped and supplied, often using spoils from conquered enemies to bolster their own forces, a self-sustaining war machine. And crucially, his generals, the commanders of these units, were either his own sons or men he had personally selected from diverse backgrounds, based purely on merit and loyalty, not birth. This ensured absolute loyalty to him and prevented the kind of factionalism and infighting that had plagued previous nomadic confederations. This cohesive command structure, coupled with relentless training and discipline, made them absolutely formidable.
That adaptability you mentioned earlier seems key here, too. Initially, these were horsemen, right? Masters of the open steppe.
What?
But how did they evolve so quickly to tackle the heavily fortified cities of these large, settled empires? That seems like a massive tactical leap.
It's one of the most striking aspects of his genius and the Mongol military system he created. Initially, yes, his troops were almost exclusively cavalry. They rode the hardy, grass-fed Mongol pony, unbelievably tough animals that needed little fodder, which was perfect for lightning raids across vast distances and defeating other nomadic groups on the steppe. With an army like that, taking fortified cities was basically impossible.
They'd just bypass them or raid the surrounding areas.
Exactly. Yet remarkably, the sources show that before long, the Mongols were able to undertake the siege of large cities. They started using formidable siege engines, things like mangonels, those massive counterweight trebuchets for throwing huge stones, catapults, scaling ladders, deploying burning oil, and so forth. They even learned techniques like diverting rivers to undermine walls or flood city defenses.
That's a huge tactical shift. It requires entirely new skills, technologies, engineering knowledge, and a fundamentally different approach to warfare than cavalry charges. This wasn't just brute force. It sounds like a sophisticated, systematic learning process. How did a nomadic leader and his people acquire such advanced siege warfare knowledge so rapidly?
Absolutely. This wasn't something they were born with. It was learned, and learned quickly. And it wasn't just military tactics either. What's truly astonishing isn't just that he learned these things, but how profoundly he seemed to transform his core worldview as well. Genghis Khan was, above all, a profoundly pragmatic learner. It was only gradually through contact with men from the more settled states he encountered and conquered advisors, captured engineers, administrators, that he came to realize there were more sophisticated ways of enjoying power and wealth than simply raiding, destroying, and plundering everything in sight. He began to grasp the long-term value of stable governance, administration, and production.
What specifically did he absorb from the settled world that transformed his understanding of governance and power? Can you give us some concrete examples from the sources?
Yeah, our sources give us several really striking examples of this learning process. A captured minister from the Temüjin Khan, the last major Mongol tribe to resist him, apparently taught him the uses of literacy and helped reduce the Mongol language to writing, using the Uyghur script. This was absolutely foundational for administering a vast empire, right? It allowed for written communication, record keeping, the codification of laws like a yasa.
Infrastructure for an empire.
Exactly. Even more strikingly, the secret history reports that it was only after the devastating war against the Muslim empire of Khwarezm, probably quite late in that campaign, around 1222, that Genghis Khan learned from his Muslim advisors the meaning and importance of towns.
Learned the importance of towns. What does that imply?
It strongly suggests an initial lack of appreciation for urban centers beyond their immediate plunder value. He saw them primarily as sources of loot, maybe obstacles to be destroyed, rather than as centers of production, trade, and administration that could generate long-term wealth.
So he initially just saw cities as targets for sacking, not as assets to be governed. That's a purely nomadic conqueror mindset, isn't it?
That's precisely the implication. And perhaps even more dramatically, it was another advisor, a man named Yelu Chikai, who had formerly been in the service of the Jin Emperor of northern China, who explained to him the uses of peasants and craftsmen as producers of taxable goods.
Taxable goods.
Yes. This was apparently a truly significant shift in his thinking because, according to some accounts, he had initially intended to convert the cultivated fields of northern China, incredibly fertile agricultural land, into grazing land for his horses.
Turn farmland into pasture.
Sure, that was the initial reported impulse. Imagine that. It reflects that pure nomadic perspective where land is primarily for grazing animals. Yelu Chukai supposedly persuaded him otherwise, arguing essentially, you can get more wealth by taxing these farmers and artisans year after year than by destroying them or turning their land into grass. He wasn't simply adding new military skills, he was systematically dismantling a nomadic economic mindset to embrace the economics of settled civilization, at least partially. This radical intellectual flexibility, this ability to completely reinvent his understanding of power and wealth generation, is a defining and often overlooked key to his empire-building genius.
That's a profound revelation. He went from planning to turn fertile farmland into horse pasture, reflecting that purely nomadic viewpoint, to understanding the economic engine of settled societies, the value of taxation. It demonstrates incredible flexibility and pragmatic intelligence. He wasn't locked into a single worldview. He could learn, adapt his approach to governance and resource management on a monumental scale. Okay, so with this evolving understanding, the great campaigns that would transform the Mongols into a true world power were launched. Where did he strike first?
Indeed. His main strategic goal, it seems, was always China. It was the wealthiest, most populous, most influential power in his known world. However, following his core principle, he first meticulously secured his western flank. He launched a tough campaign against the Tangut Kingdom of Sixia, which was a significant northwestern border state of China.
The no enemy in the rear principle again.
Exactly. Only after neutralizing that potential threat did he fall upon the powerful Jin Empire of northern China in 1211. The war there was brutal and prolonged. In 1214, he actually allowed himself to be bought off temporarily with a huge amount of booty silks, gold, horses, princesses. But he resumed operations the very next year, 1215, leading to the capture and sacking of the Jin capital, Zhongdu, near modern Beijing. Subsequently, the more systematic grinding subjugation of the rest of northern China was entrusted to his highly capable and loyal general, Mukhali, which freed up Genghis himself to turn his attention westward.
And then comes the Khwarezm War. This is where the Mongols really gained that fearsome reputation for utter destruction, isn't it? The sheer terror they inflicted seems to reach a new level here.
Yes, this war absolutely cemented that reputation. It was largely provoked, or at least the immediate trigger was, the actions of the governor of the Khwarezmian border city of Otrar. He foolishly massacred a caravan of Muslim merchants who were traveling under Genghis Khan's explicit protection, his peza or passport.
A direct insult and violation.
A huge one. When the Khwarezm Shah, Muhammad II, refused to hand over the governor or provide satisfaction for this affront, war became inevitable. Though our sources do note it likely would have come eventually anyway, given the expansionist nature of both empires bumping up against each other. But that incident provided the casus belli, and it was in this devastating war across Central Asia that the Mongols truly earned their terrifying reputation for savagery and terror.
How so? What characterized this campaign?
City after city was stormed, often after promising leniency if they surrendered, only to break that promise. The inhabitants were frequently either massacred outright or brutally forced to serve as human shields, as advanced troops for the Mongols against their own neighboring cities and people. A horrifyingly effective psychological tactic.
Turning people against each other.
Yes. Fields and gardens were laid waste, and crucially, vital irrigation works, the lifeblood of agriculture in that arid region, were systematically destroyed. This was all driven, it seems, by Genghis Khan's implacable vengeance against the royal house of Khwarezm, which he felt had directly insulted his authority and honor.
So it wasn't just military conquest in this case. It often sounds like an act of deliberate, widespread psychological warfare and devastating reprisal. Almost a performative brutality designed to break the will of any future resistance anywhere.
It was definitely a complex mix. Mongol practice, especially in the Khwarezm War, often involved sending agents ahead of the main army to demoralize and divide the garrison and the populace of an enemy city. They'd mix terrifying threats with vague promises of mercy. And the Mongols' sheer reputation for frightfulness often paralyzed their opponents. People sometimes allowed themselves to be killed even when resistance or maybe flight might not have been entirely impossible, simply out of sheer terror. Resistance certainly brought guaranteed destruction. However, the sources also point out that massacre was sometimes used for its own sake, or perhaps more accurately, for tactical reasons, beyond mere punishment for resistance.
Like the example of Balkh.
Exactly. At Balkh, a major city in what's now Afghanistan, despite a prompt surrender, the population was reportedly let out and systematically slaughtered. This was explicitly stated as being for tactical reasons, perhaps, to send an unmistakable message to other cities further afield, or to ensure no potential resistance could form in their rear as they advanced, or maybe even just to manage resources by not having captives. It highlights that the brutality wasn't always a direct consequence of resistance. It was a chilling, calculated tool in their arsenal. Genghis Khan finally withdrew from the Khwarezm region in 1223, leaving much of Central Asia utterly devastated, and he didn't personally lead his armies into a major war again until his final campaign against Jixia, the Tangut kingdom, in 1226-27.
Reflecting on the sheer scale of these campaigns, China, Central Asia, and the rapid evolution of their military tactics, going from steppe cavalry to sophisticated siege engineers, it's clear this wasn't just a series of random raids. It was the deliberate, expanding conquest that fundamentally reshaped continents. And you have to think about the strategic depth required to achieve this, adapting not just tactics, but his entire worldview. From plunder to understanding the long-term value of taxation and settled populations. It's truly astonishing, a testament to his unparalleled capacity for learning and strategic thinking, however brutal the methods. So Genghis Khan's life was this absolute whirlwind, wasn't it? Relentless conquest, systematic consolidation, nation-building on an epic scale. But beyond the battles, the strategies, the bloodshed, what kind of man was he truly? Do the sources give us a sense of his personality? Was he just this ruthless conqueror? Or was there more complexity there? And how did his extraordinary life finally come to an end?
Our sources, despite being so disparate, Mongol epic, frightened chroniclers from Persia and Europe, they do allow us to piece together a pretty complex personality. On one hand, he clearly possessed immense personal strengths. The Secret History emphasizes his great physical strength, tenacity of purpose, and an unbreakable will.
Yeah.
He just didn't give up.
Brilliant.
Incredibly driven. But interestingly, he was apparently not obstinate. He was flexible. He would listen to advice from others, even significantly from his wives and his mother, Hulin. That shows an openness rare for such powerful autocratic leaders, especially in that era. He could certainly be deceptive when necessary in warfare and diplomacy, but our sources also note he was not petty in his personal dealings or motivations. He seemed to operate on a grand scale.
What about things like loyalty and treachery? How did he view those?
That's a fascinating aspect. He clearly held a strong sense of the value of loyalty to him, of course. It was a trait he found conspicuously lacking in figures like Togrul or Jamuka, who ultimately betrayed alliances or friendships. Enemies who were guilty of treachery toward their own lords could expect very short shrift from him if they were captured. However, he was also pragmatic enough to exploit their treachery at the same time. He often rewarded defectors or traitors if their betrayal benefited him, even while perhaps despising the act itself.
It sounds like a man of fascinating contradictions, especially in his moral compass, if you can call it that.
He absolutely was. He was also described, especially in the Mongol sources, as religiously minded. He seemed carried along by this profound sense of divine mission, that he was chosen by Tengri, the eternal blue heaven. In moments of crisis, he would reportedly climb a mountain alone, pray, and reverently worship Tengri, believing his conquests were divinely ordained. This spiritual conviction seems to have been a core part of his early life and continued to fuel his ambition throughout his campaigns.
But did that change as he encountered other cultures?
Well, the picture of his personality arguably becomes less harmonious, as one source puts it, as he moved beyond his familiar steppe environment and encountered the strange, settled world. Initially, faced with the wealth and complexity of places like Khwarez, he couldn't perhaps see beyond the immediate gains of massacre and rapine, and he was, at times, clearly consumed by a passion for revenge, as we saw vividly with the Khwarezm War. Yet throughout his entire life, he retained this extraordinary ability to attract loyal service from men. Not just his fellow nomads, but also civilized men, administrators, scholars, engineers from the settled world, who found themselves drawn to his vision, his charisma, his sheer force of will.
Like Yelu Chikai or the Taoist sage.
Exactly. His fame was such that it could even persuade the aged Taoist sage Changchun to undertake this incredible journey all the way across Asia just to discourse with him on religious matters and the secret of immortality. That's a testament to his magnetic appeal and perhaps his intellectual curiosity, even late in life. But above all else, as we've discussed, the defining trait seems to have been adaptability. He was adaptable, a man who could learn, constantly evolving his strategies, his administration, his entire worldview.
So boiling it down, what were the fundamental pillars of his incredible military success? The factors that allowed him to transform this complex, adaptable personality into world-altering power. It wasn't just individual brilliance driving it all, was it? There had to be a system.
The sources are pretty clear on the core factors: organization, discipline, mobility, and ruthlessness of purpose. Those were the bedrock of his military triumphs. His meticulous organization, that decimal system, the logistics, the communication, ensured efficiency on a scale previously unknown in steppe warfare. The rigid discipline of his troops, enforced through the Yasa, his law code, with harsh penalties for disobedience or cowardice, made them an unyielding, cohesive force. Their unparalleled mobility, leveraging the hardy Mongol ponies and a deep understanding of terrain and timing, allowed them to strike with lightning speed and achieve strategic surprise repeatedly. And absolutely central to that ruthlessness of purpose was the weapon of terror.
We keep coming back to terror.
Because it was fundamental. Massacres of defeated populations, the deliberate destruction of cities, the stories that spread like wildfire ahead of his armies. This resultant terror was a weapon he regularly, consciously used to break enemy morale before or even during an engagement. The psychological effect of Mongol frightfulness often meant that cities or armies would surrender at the mere rumor of their approach, avoiding a costly siege or battle altogether.
And we noted the chilling tactic at Balk, where even prompt surrender didn't guarantee safety. It's a nuance that really highlights the cold, calculated nature behind some of these actions, isn't it?
Yes. As we discussed, Mongol practice, particularly in that Khwarezm War, involved sending agents ahead to demoralize and divide the garrison and populace, mixing threats with promises. The sheer reputation often paralyzed captives. Resistance certainly brought destruction. But at Balk, slaughter despite surrender shows it was for tactical reasons. It sent an unambiguous message, maybe eliminated potential future threats, or simply managed resources. It underscores that the brutality wasn't always just reactive. It was a proactive, strategic tool used to enforce submission and prevent future revolts across the vast territories he was conquering.
So after this incredible life of conquest, transformation, and terror, when did Genghis Khan finally die? When did his reign end?
He died on August 18, 1227, according to the sources.
And the context? Was he in retirement?
Not at all. It occurred during his final campaign against the Tangut kingdom of Xixia, the very state he had targeted way back to secure his western flank before attacking China proper. His life ended while still on campaign, still actively engaged in consolidating his empire and punishing perceived disloyalty from the Tangut ruler. It was, in a way, a fitting end for a man who seemed to live for conquest, organization, and the relentless pursuit of his goals.
And what about the grandiose achievements of his reign? When you look back, what was the ultimate impact of his life's work? What did he leave behind?
His achievements were truly grandiose, almost unbelievable in their scale. First, he successfully united all the nomadic tribes of Mongolia, forging them into a cohesive nation, a feat no one before him had managed with such lasting effect. And then, incredibly, with armies that were often numerically inferior compared to the vast populations of their targets, he defeated formidable, long-established empires like Khwarezm and the even more powerful Jin state of northern China.
And he did this without destroying his own base.
Critically, yes. He managed to do all of this, wage decades of war across vast distances without exhausting his own people. He didn't deplete the Mongol manpower or resources catastrophically. He always seemed to ensure the army was supplied, replenished, often incorporating conquered peoples into his forces. Furthermore, he demonstrated remarkable foresight in choosing his successor. He designated his third son, Ugadai, known more for his diplomacy and generosity than martial prowess, with great care. And importantly, he secured the agreement of his other powerful sons, like Chagatai and Tolui, ensuring they would obey Ugadai. This careful succession planning was absolutely vital for the empire's continued stability after his death, preventing the immediate fragmentation that so often plagued nomadic confederations when a strong leader died.
So he didn't just conquer, he built a system, a state, that could endure beyond his own lifetime. He laid a blueprint for future expansion and governance.
Precisely. He passed on to his successor, Ugadai, an army and a state in full vigor. perfectly poised for even greater expansion. At the time of his death in 1227, Genghis Khan had already conquered an immense landmass, a territory extending from Beijing in the east all the way to the Caspian Sea in the west. And his generals, like Jebe and Subutai, had already conducted deep reconnaissance raids into Persia and southern Russia, establishing a fearsome reputation and extensive territorial claims far beyond the initial conquests.
So the seeds were sown for something even bigger.
Absolutely. While the destruction brought about by Genghis Khan certainly survives vividly in popular memory, particularly in the lands he devastated, our sources make a crucial distinction. These conquests, vast as they were but the first stage of the Mongol Empire. It was his successors, particularly Ugedei, Mongke, and Kublai Khan, who would extend Mongol power over the whole of China, Persia, most of Russia, and parts of Eastern Europe, establishing the largest contiguous land empire the world has ever seen. They achieved what Genghis himself perhaps never really intended, initially that is, to weld these vast and disparate conquests into a relatively tightly organized empire with a sophisticated administrative structure, a postal system, standardized laws, and facilitated trade routes like the Silk Road.
That's a really powerful point. He laid the foundation, the military and political basis, but his descendants truly built the towering structure of the unified empire.
Indeed, the Mongol Empire, which he initiated, became, as one source puts it, the greatest continental empire of medieval and modern times. So while the terror and destruction are rightly remembered and were undeniably real and horrific for millions, his complex legacy also includes the creation of a unified Mongol nation that endures to this day, and providing the blueprint, the impetus, for an unparalleled empire that fundamentally reshaped global history, facilitating unprecedented levels of trade, communication, and cultural exchange across Eurasia for generations, the so-called Pax Mongolica.
So what does this all mean for us, then? We've journeyed through this incredible, often brutal, and always fascinating life of Genghis Khan. We've seen him rise from the desperate struggles of an abandoned boy, truly minor chieftain, to become the strategic genius, the universal ruler.
Yeah, and to sort of recap the essential takeaways for you, the listener, we've explored his truly humble, really harrowing origins, where just survival itself was a daily struggle. We've seen the brutal, yes, but incredibly effective methods he employed for unification, that systematic, ruthless elimination of rivals that forged a completely new kind of loyalty, transforming steppe society forever. And we've really highlighted his surprising adaptability, his capacity for learning, how he absorbed the lessons of the settled world, from literacy to siegecraft to taxation, to transform his whole approach to power and governance, moving far beyond simple plunder. And finally, we've touched upon the monumental scale of the empire he founded, even if, as we said, his successors completed the full blueprint of its tightly organized structure, building on that massive foundation he laid.
And while our focus today is squarely on history, the story of Genghis Khan, you can't help but feel it subtly speaks to these enduring themes, doesn't it? Leadership, resilience in the face of just overwhelming odds, and that capacity for radical adaptation. It's a stark reminder, perhaps, that even from the most desperate circumstances, extraordinary individuals can emerge and completely reshape their world, for better or worse.
Absolutely. And this maybe leads us to a final thought-provoking question for you to mull over after this deep dive. Genghis Khan's conquests are widely remembered, perhaps primarily remembered, for their destruction and the sheer terror they inspired. But given that he also established the foundation for what became the greatest continental empire of medieval and modern times, and created a unified Mongol nation that has endured for 8 centuries, arguably ushering in an era of unprecedented interconnectedness across Eurasia, does history's judgment of him, often focused solely on the brutality, truly capture the full scope of his complex legacy? Or are we sometimes too quick to simplify the immense, often contradictory forces and leaders that shape our world?
That is a question well worth pondering. And if this deep dive has sparked your curiosity, we definitely encourage you to explore more. Maybe check out translations of The Secret History of the Mongols, or delve into the later phases of the Mongol Empire under his successors like Ugedei or Kublai Khan. There's just so much more to uncover about this pivotal, world-changing period in history.